welcome to the Joanne Avison podcast. Today, I'm going to answer a question that was posed to me. How does fascia influence your movement patterns? I want to talk about that. I want to answer that question, and I want to bring up the question, how do your movement patterns influence your fascia? So I want to think of it both ways around. It matters. The pattern of your movement matters to your fascia, and the matter of your fascia patterns your movement. They're mutually integrated. This is where one of the principles that inevitably comes in that people call spiritual is that spirituality, or the study of spirituality, whatever modality you read about or study or learn or find a guru to teach you about, one of the keystones is always about wholeness, is about belonging to the whole, is about connectivity, is about recognizing that as humans being, we're not separate from each other. And the parts within us are not separate from ourselves. Now, one of the huge difficulties about learning about fascia, and especially teaching about it, because you're teaching into sometimes and already listening, that is broken down into component parts. And people want to know how one movement can influence the fascia, or how the fascia can influence one movement. And that's like taking a pen and breaking it down into the spring and the barrel and the ink, and then making it the foundation of the quality of the writing. They're intimately related, but there's so many different elements of them that I'm left asking the question again, how does fascia influence your movement patterns? But how do your movement patterns influence your fascia? Now, I remember years and years ago when I worked quite closely with Tom Myers for several months, and I did over 250,000 air miles, becoming one of his teachers and shadowing him around the world. And one of the things he said to me was, look at how your body can change your mind. Now, one of the foundations of my study had been, look at how your mind can change your body. And then when we put them all together and realize that as humans being, we include many aspects of the physical, the imaginal, the emotional, the mental, the conscious, the unconscious, we're all of that connected. And one of the most profound examples of that comes when you do any depth of study on left and right brain thinking. Now, I happen to love the work of Jill Bolt-Taylor and Dr. Ian McGilchrist. They're both neuroscientists, and Ian McGilchrist is a psychiatrist, and they are both, or have both devoted their lives to understanding the human brain in various ways, not always the same. But their work really highlights how essential it is for us to understand that left and right brain are not separate, and they have very different qualities, very different storage systems, if you want to call them that. The context of both and the content of both are joined by the corpus callosum, and they are integrated. They're not separate, but they're distinct. Now, what's that got to do with fascia and your movement patterns? Well, everything. Because fascia contains everything in us. It's the architecture of the forms of all of us. And because it's the architecture of the forms of all of us, it inevitably shapes the in-between of those forms. So even though we give that in between different names, depending on what stage of development we're at, or depending which part of the body we designate, the fascia is the architecture of the skin around, the things inside, and the in-between, animated in real life by the being animating the body. And if you animate it in a particular pattern, i.e. you move it in a certain way, it responds by shaping itself accordingly. My personal belief is that it's here to assist, to help. And if you keep on doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, like it or not, it starts forming that pattern in support of your insistence that you keep doing it that way. And that becomes a repetitive strain injury, which might be why, or part of the reason why, elite athletes, for an example, that do the same thing over and over and over again as if more is always better, end up washed up in their 30s sometimes, all too often in my opinion, because they're repeating the same thing over and over again, and there isn't this quality of counterbalancing introduced to the tissue, because it's all based in what we might call left brain reasoning. Now, left brain reasoning holds all the words. The left side of our brain loves a stereotype. Stereos means fixed. So it likes stereotypes, it likes naming things, it likes giving things a name and keeping them that way. It loves movement protocols. You do 10 of those and 12 of those and 7 of those, and you increase the weight for each one, or you calculate how well you swim by the number of strokes per length, or you calculate how well you run by the speed you cover a certain distance, or your strides per mile. Absolutely fascinating, and such gorgeous, useful data to tell you how productive you've been. But is that the whole story? Of course it isn't. That other side of the brain, the right side of the brain, loves archetypes. It's archetypical rather than stereotypical. Now, what's an archetype as distinct from a stereotype? Well, an archetype means variations on the original. So a stereotype is a fixed type. It's this way. And an archetype is a sort of an original, nuanced version of a archetype. Now, I've had the great privilege of studying archetypes for decades now. And one of the things that I've discovered is that people's preferred motion patterns and people's favorite kinds of movement and the design of their movements is archetypal, meaning their morphology, their shape is archetypal because the way they move patterns the matter. The way somebody moves patterns the matter of their body, of their form. Now stay with me because I'm going to match this all up. Your left brain loves words. Your right brain loves poetry, which needs words, but it also includes the spaces in between, the rhyme and the rhythm of the way the words are used, the quality of how the words are spoken in time, and many more nuanced understandings of those words. Now, the words reside as information in the left brain. The transformation of those words into poetry requires our kind of right brain integration. Now, in the human body, the fascia matrix, which, let me add, defies definition, scientists at the top of the field, and I could name at least half a dozen of them, but I'm not going to, you know who you are struggling to define fascia. Anatomically, it is considered to be a sheath or sheet that is dissectable. You can say that about any part of the body. funnily enough, because the body is entirely dissectable. And it's not enough. It doesn't begin to describe the power, the beauty, the exquisite nature of the fascial matrix in which we form, that forms us, and because it's a sensory organ, informs us about the forms we make. So the pattern of our matter is changed by the matter of how we pattern it. Go figure. I know. It isn't part of the divide and conquer age of reason reductionist theory that our left brain loves. God love a stereotype. If only it was that simple. If only it came down to information in and combination facts out. But then we wouldn't be human, because what we also include is this incredible thing called wonder and awe and mystery. So the history that lives so beautifully in our left brain, in our intellectual center, can be accessed by naming the fascia, naming every single aspect of the body, defining each one. But the right brain, this archetypal awareness where wonder and awe live, loves mystery. It loves not knowing. It loves being curious. What's that got to do with fascia? Well, pretty much everything. Because while fascia is a very physical thing that does have rules and regulations and ways of behaving, which are far more extensive and significant than they've ever been given credit for in our history, we have this exquisite fabric of our form that is sensory, that is proprioceptive. What does that mean? That means it feels its way into form and forms feelings from the feedback. It means it responds to pressure, to change in temperature, to subtle things that we don't have time to deduce in our reasoning minds. It occurs naturally as part of our way of being. Take this. I've got a glass of water. You can see how hot it is today. And I've lifted it up and I'm going to drink. Those of you that can't see me that are listening, that was me slurping through a glass straw from my drink that's full of cucumber and lime and ice cold water, because it's a very hot day. Now, my body has already adjusted to the fact that some of that water is now on the inside, and the weight of this glass is now less than it was because some of the water's gone out of it. That wasn't a whole deduction and a maths program, and I had to go out and work out the weight and the blah, 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 blah. My body does it reflexively. It does it proprioceptively. It does it imperceptibly quickly, faster than the nervous system has time to report back to the brain and come out again. I just drink and adjust. And if I fail to adjust and I lift this up with the same amount of force that was required when it was full, I'm going to end up wearing that water. Our fascial matrix is profoundly influenced by our movements. And our movements are profoundly and subtly influenced by its awareness and its feedback. And it's all happening at once in a Mobius loop. Now, I talked about stereotypes because the left brain loves a fixed stereotype. It thinks everything is separate. And it loves to divide and conquer, which means break everything down into its component parts and then work out how they work if they all came together. And it loves deductive reasoning, which is brilliant. And we are emerging from the age of reason in a state of amazement about AI. Well, sit tight, because our right brain, which handles proprioception, doesn't really care very much about reasoning. It's curious. It doesn't mind not knowing. It wonders, it asks, maybe, or what if? And sometimes I wonder if, when we were little ones, we saw something happen and our reasoning minds deduced that that meant that meant that, and we made a list of rules, that still that little one, when it comes to our energy in motion, dictates some of the reasoning that we think we need to abide by. Something that came from our parents and our parents' parents and our parents' 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 parents, all from deductive reasoning. But wait a minute, don't we talk about our childlike wonder? The awe and amazement when something mysterious happens, or we look at something unusual. I remember when a very, very, very dear friend of mine was in the garden with his son, and his son came running over to us. And he said, Daddy, I just saw a bee. And his daddy looked at him and said, did you? And he said, yes, Daddy, it was hanging in the air. And that child's face was so full of wonder. His whole beingness was so thrilled by the bee that was hanging in the air. And it's quite a gorgeous and well-known fact that aerodynamically, if we did all the left brain reasoning in the world, bees can't fly. But they can. So there's something more to it. And what I want to really anchor for you in this short and possibly crazy podcast is that you're both. Your fascia is the fluid matrix, the liquid crystal matrix that you self-organized as an embryo into you, completely uniquely. And you influenced through your movements, through the shape, through the way you were able to grow, you influenced those patterns, and those patterns influenced you back. It's a mutual, co-creative, exquisite, human, sacred, geometrical process. Fascia is much more than a thing that can be defined stereotypically. It's a kind of context for the content of us, as well as participating in every aspect of that content. So the pattern of our matter is an integrated process that, while it has the patterns of our species, it's always unique. And that uniqueness, ironically, paradoxically, makes us all the same. What makes us all the same is that every single one of us is unique. Now that means that every single one of us is a prototype. So hang on a minute, Joe. You're talking about stereotypes and archetypes and prototypes. Absolutely. Stereotypically, there's lots of fixed ideas about how you should move, how you should behave, and what you're made of, and what the parts are. And there's lots of agreement and lots of disagreement about that, as there is argument about the science that is supposed to dominate the reasoning. Archetypically, every single one of us has a unique combination of behaviors. So our fascia matrix is uniquely expressed, which makes each one of us a prototype. All three, oh my goodness, a holy trinity And when we go deep, which we will, we discover that that Holy Trinity, that triangulation, is the foundation of our form. And when we discover that, we realize that our geometry, our roundness, isn't about divide and conquer into bits. It's about unify. It's about multiply and unite. It's about joining all those whole and complete round cells that all form together in this exquisite connecting tissue matrix with all its tubes and pockets and pouches that are never, ever totally separate from each other within us. They are all part of the continuity. That when we were embryos, we talk about the divisions of the embryonic form, and we talk about the conceptus, or the whatever you want to call it, the zygote. It's got all posh names, whatever, but basically the fertilized egg that's going to become you supposedly has a first division into 2 and a second division into 4 and a third division into 8, and it keeps dividing. Well, sorry guys, but in my world, when 1 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 4 and 4 becomes 8, that's multiplying. But we remain unified. So I come back to this left brain idea of divide and conquer and this right brain possibility, curiosity about multiply and unite. And if we could bring the whole lot together in this magic moment in the middle, you are the prototype right now, living and breathing the way you do in a completely unique way, all belonging to you. And how you move influences the pattern of this over time, this body that you call you. And the pattern of this body that you call you influences how you move. They are mutual, co-creative, exquisite processes. So let me know in the comments your questions, your thoughts. I love hearing from you. I do my utmost to get back to everybody whenever I can. And understand this tissue, in my opinion, doesn't always love this left brain deductive reasoning where we shout at it and tell it to work in numbers. But it invariably responds to the whispering campaigns of micro-movement medicine. It changes the matrix, and it really beautifully and exquisitely honors the patterns over time in a way that we haven't fully explored or considered. So if that inspires you, let me know in the comments. Check out myofascialmagic.com, and sending love and light and blessings to every single one of you. I hope this raises some interesting questions. Take care and God bless.